Hello, welcome to the Millionaire Woman Show, where we'll be discussing leadership, business, and human potential, inspiring you to live rich from the inside out. Unlock your creativity, stretch out of your comfort zone, break through your barriers, take inspired action, and achieve epic results. Now, here's your host, two-time best-selling author, speaker, and certified executive coach, Debra Kasowski.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a Millionaire Woman Show. I'm your host, Debra Kasowski, and we are talking about principles of leadership, business, and human potential. And today I have a special guest who is an expert on the subject that I totally love, and it's all about mindset and emotional intelligence. Dr. Marcia Reynolds, Master Certified Coach, is fascinated by the brain, especially what triggers feelings of connection, commitment, and possibility. She draws on her research as she helps coaches and leaders use their presence to make every conversation is difference-making experience. She has provided executive coaching and leadership training programs in 41 countries. Dr. Reynolds is the training director for the Healthcare Coaching Institute at Virginia Tech. She was the 5th global president of the International Coach Federation, ICF, and she also faculty for the International Coach Academy in Russia and create China Coaching in China, and she is recognized by global gurus as the number 3 coach in the world and number 1 woman. Prior to coaching, she has ran training departments for 2 global companies. Her greatest success came after designing employee programs to improve communications for a semiconductor company facing bankruptcy. In 3 years, the company was the most successful IPO in the United States. Interviews and excerpts from Marcia's books, Outsmart Your Brain, How to Master Your Mind When Emotions Take the Wheel, Wonder Woman, How High-Achieving Women Find Contentment and Direction, and The Discomfort Zone, How Leaders Turn Difficult Conversations into Breakthrough, have appeared in many places, including Fast Company, Psychology Today, and the Wall Street Journal. Marcia's doctoral degree is in organizational psychology, and she has 2 master's degrees in education and communication. Her website is www.outsmartyourbrain.com. Please welcome to the show, Dr. Marcia Reynolds.
Thank you, Deborah. It's so glad to be here. Yeah.
Well, I'm so happy to have you here. And I was going through your website, listening to your intros, and just super excited to talk to you about this subject because it's a subject that's dear to my heart as well. And one of the things that came to my mind is how people can, you were talk about changing your mind. Everything's about changing your thoughts, changing your behavior, and tricking the brain. How do you get yourself to do things that you maybe not thinking that you can do, or getting stuck in indecisiveness?
Yeah.
So I'd love for you to just tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So, we've been taught, and many people before us, that everything's going on in our logical brain, and that we just have to change our thoughts and it's going to make everything okay. And even the concept of emotions, that we can somehow control that, when actually emotions control us, don't they?
They sure do.
Yeah. And so with that in mind, to trick the brain, we have to actually shift our emotional state. Because all those things you mentioned are really as a result of, I can't make a decision because I'm afraid, or I don't want to move forward because of the risks. And yet we'll come up with logical reasons why we can't do those things. I always say we're masters at rationalization. It's not a good time. It will hurt people. We come up with all those things and we believe them. But if you consciously say, I recognize that I'm frustrated, I'm afraid, and take a breath and shift into hopefulness, gratitude for what I have right now, just to change the chemistry. then we can start looking at, beyond that limitations that we create for ourselves.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So how does our brain limit the potential?
Yeah. We often think that our brain is about solving problems and doing things well, when actually the brain's primary function is to keep you safe.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It goes through that primitive fight, flight part of the brain first, and then we run into social needs. And so we worry about being liked, being respected, being seen as credible. All this stuff, it happens before it ever hits our logical brain. And so the brain says, I want you to feel safe. I want you to feel comfortable. So I'm not going to allow you to take a risk. I'm not going to allow you to say something that might be mistaken. And so we hold our thoughts in. Or we put ourselves out in a way we think will be accepted, even though it may be against our own values.
Mm-hmm.
So recognizing and saying, brain, thank you for taking care of me, but I don't need you right now. Right now, there's some things that I want to achieve and I want to do that may feel uncomfortable, but I'm going to do it anyway. We have to tell ourselves that and just release, those fears and things that paralyze our actions.
Well, when I was doing some research, when I was talking about outsmarting the brain, it said that it could be as simple as putting on a sock. You can shift your thinking just to make it feel as simple.
Yeah.
As putting on a sock. And I'm like, oh, I wish it was that easy.
Right. Well, again, the reason why it's not is because your brain's constantly giving you messages that don't serve you. And so again, what the easy part is just to shut down your brain, but we're not good at it, so it just takes some practice. But the time that was really significant for me was I was actually in Switzerland at a conference up in the Alps, and I decided that I was going to parasail off this Alp. And we went up many, many, many flights on the mountain to where it was like full of snow and it was springtime. And then we got there and, I wouldn't be jumping off by myself. I had the guide attached to me behind me. But he laid out the parachute and then he said, run to the cliff. And exactly. I'm like, really? I mean, this was so high up and it's like, I'm going to run toward the cliff. He says, well, you've got to run as fast as you can. Otherwise the parachute won't lift, and won't carry you. So if you want to save yourself, you got to run toward the cliff. I have to tell you, Debra, that I'll never forget how I had to override my brain and say, I'm not going to die, brain. This is going to be awesome. It's going to be okay. And I was terrified. So this isn't about making the feelings go away. It's about being with them and saying, I recognize I'm terrified and I'm going to do it anyway, because this is it. It's going to be awesome. Got right to the cliff, boom, and jumped, and the parachute caught us and it was beautiful down. But I'll never forget that. It's like, if I can override my brain in that situation, I can do it anywhere.
So did he run with you at the same time?
Yeah, he was behind me. Of course, I couldn't see him.
Right.
I could hear him though.
Oh my gosh.
So all I could see was cliff,
Yeah.
So, but that's the point. Our brain only sees cliff. It doesn't see the beautiful surroundings and the possibility.
Right.
So again, it's like, emotional intelligence, as it's not about making the emotions go away. They're going to be there. The brain's going to react.
Mm-hmm.
But to say, thank you, brain. I see that you're trying to protect me. And I feel my fear, and this is what I choose. I feel my anger, and this is what I choose. So it's being with emotions, not making them wrong, because that's just information. It's just a human experience. And still making the conscious choice based on the outcome we want to create.
Yeah. And you know what, that's fascinating. And maybe it's just, I believe in serendipity, but today when I was reviewing Instagram, there was a post that said, why don't we run to our dreams? And it makes me think of this cliff now, is that we're not running toward them because the fear comes up.
Yeah.
People avoid taking the step because of all the what ifs that come up.
Right. And then we say, well, I'll do it, but just not today.
Yeah.
Which,
or maybe someone else
happens.
is right. Or someone else's opinion is more valid than my own.
Yeah.
So then we start doing that rationalizing.
The shoulds. Right. Yeah. I should do this. Yeah. And the interesting thing about fear is it's very foggy. We don't really know what we're afraid of. We're just afraid. And it's so fascinating to me in coaching when I just even ask the simple question, coming back to your simple, what's the worst that can happen? It's like people don't even recognize that, something bad could happen, but I always follow it up. How likely will that happen? Usually not. The day I left my last corporate position to start my business, all these people came to me and say, how did you have the courage to do that? And I'm like, what courage? It's something I want to try. And if it doesn't work, I'll go get a job.
Yeah.
I saw it like that, but they saw it as the end of my career and I'll destroy my family. And, we just catastrophize everything when we don't break down the fear into what it truly is. But this is difficult to do on our own. So, that's why I love coaching. Coaching does that. Or even a friend that won't tell you what to do or say, oh, don't be afraid. Just say, so what is it you're really afraid of?
Yeah.
What that can happen and how likely will that happen?
Exactly. So let me ask you, did you have a big plan in place before you took your leap?
I'm not a big planner. I have an intention and kind of a vision, and then I kind of take the leap.
So it's not like you had a whole bunch of contracts lined up that you already...
Oh my God, no. But I was like, I got a lot of experience. I've got degrees. People will like me.
Yeah, and you'll figure it out.
Yeah, I did have one in particular, a former boss actually that hired me and then moved on to another company. He gave me enough work that I felt comfortable. But also, this is interesting too, and I'm sure many people, not just women, experience this. But women in particular think they have to be really good or even perfect at something before they try it. And I fortunately learned early on. I took jobs in industries that I had no idea what they were talking about. And I just said, I'll figure it out. And I don't know, did my dad give me that? I mean, who gave me that? That it's like, well, I'll figure it out. I went from healthcare to high tech, never touched a computer. I'm like, I'll figure it out, So when I left, I knew that I wasn't anywhere near perfect, not even a great coach. I was just learning, but I still had the guts to call reporters and say, hey, there's this new profession. I was lucky to be on the starting part of it. And would you like to talk about it? And so I just put myself out there, talked to people about it, told people what I was doing, and I just started getting clients. So that whole, I don't have to be perfect in order to still make a difference for me. Yeah. And
that leads me to the question for women. I think we get caught up, and men too, just that I hear it more from women as well, is that we get caught up in a narrative. We have a story that we need to start changing. And I think
absolutely
what you're alluding to is that perfection piece.
Yeah. There's two pieces to that I actually found in my research when, my doctoral research was on high achieving women in the workplace. And it's not always perfection. There are those that want it to be perfect and then they just take forever to get there. But the rest of us that don't do details well or plans, we still aim for excellence,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and so I call this the burden of greatness, that I must be great at whatever I do, otherwise I shouldn't even try. And so fortunately I thought I could be great, but you know, that's sometimes an illusion. What is that would define great? And why is it that I have to work myself so hard to be better than anybody else? You know, and then we like, oh, I'm out of balance. You know?
Yes.
And we work ourselves into being sick, because we have to, we have this story, oh, women have to work harder, and you know, they have to accomplish more. It's like, really, is that really true? Is that really true? At some places it may be, but not everywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So break down the stories. What's the story I'm telling? And is it true? Or what part of it is true?
Yeah. Or are we using it to be true to prevent us from making that next step?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, that's, you know, the frame we live in, which is often very limiting. But Debra, that's a great question about what is the story I'm telling, because there's a researcher up at the Cleveland Institute who says, you know, we always say we have to think outside of the box, but we can't think outside of the box till we see the box. So you have to see the box before you see outside it. So what is that story? What's the frame that's holding you in? Because once you see that, you can start to see the gaps in logic, your fears, you know, the context.
Yes.
And then you can see beyond it.
Yeah. I find it fascinating because when we talk about or hear of different groups promoting diversity, different genders, you know, all the different controversial subjects.
Yeah.
I find it fascinating because I was watching a feed again on Facebook and people were commenting, and what I saw was a lot of judgment. Someone had made a comment and they started, you know, going at them versus thinking, well, they obviously don't understand what's going on. So they posted with a little bit of a question, but also a statement. And instead of attacking them, it would be so much better if we could come from a place of being curious and saying, what do you need to know?
Yeah.
How can I inform you?
Yeah.
Right. And I just sat back and I thought because it got into a kind of a smashing a little bit. And
they love that on Facebook.
Oh, and the person
like you have permission.
Yeah, and the person whose post it was, she had just gone and said, there's a difference between this and this.
Yeah.
And she said, I will take your congratulations, and just left it.
Wow.
With the high road.
Yeah, no, you have to do that.
Yeah, it was so much better. But I thought the person who was getting excited about it, I thought, if you could.
Oh, and they get mean.
Yes.
You know, so I blog for Psychology Today. I have for years.
Yeah.
And I get a lot of really good comments and interesting perspectives, and I always acknowledge their perspective. But then there's always somebody who just comes out from left field like, you're so stupid. It's like, disagree with me, but call me stupid, you know?
Yeah.
For what reason?
But that's the interesting thing, Marcia. I find that we want to all have different opinions, and at the same time, you want everybody to be the same and conform. And there's that struggle, to allow people to be who they are. And if they don't understand or they don't agree, it's okay. But I see so much in the world that they want everybody to conform, and yet they want to promote freedom of speech, and you can't do it.
Oh, I know. It's such a hypocrisy.
Yeah. I just find it can get really confusing for people.
Right. You know, I have to say to you, Debra, I was at a conference in Victoria a couple of weeks ago, and there was a bunch of people talking, and I had to say, wow, I'm so happy to hear that you all are just as messed up as we are in the U.S. Because we always have this vision like, oh, it's so wonderful in Canada. You know, it's like they don't have our problems, but it's like, oh no, we have these everywhere.
Yeah, we're more alike than different.
Oh, I know. Yeah, it's so amazing. You know, And yet there are stories. One that I've written about is there's this guy, and it was in the Washington Post a couple of years ago, Derek Black, whose father was a leader in the white supremacist movement and had a radio show on it, and Derek was supposed to be his heir and take over. And he went to this college that his parents didn't approve of because there was a lot of liberals there. And but he said, no, it's a good school. Well, he was invited by the Jewish community to come to dinner on Friday night and just talk. And they ended up having this conversation well into the night about their different views and what they thought and what they were afraid of. And he, early in the next morning, he wrote a letter to his father and said, I'm sorry, but I can no longer hate these people. You know, now that I know them, and that's a big part of it, we have to get to know each other. Now that I know them and why they see things the way they do, whether I agree or not, I understand them. And, you know, and then the interesting thing, when it was Thanksgiving, he tried to go home and his father wouldn't let him in. You know, his mother did, but his father wouldn't. And it took quite a while before his father would even have a conversation with him. So there's what you had said earlier about the shoulds, you know, and what other people are telling us. But Derek Black was brave enough to say, this is what I've learned, and broke his frame, and no longer go back. You know, and I just love that story, that it's exactly what you're saying. If we could just stop and listen, it doesn't mean I have to agree with you. You know, so you said at the beginning, you shared, I've been going and teaching in Russia for 17 years.
Wow.
And in China for 8. I'm always fascinated to hear their perspective. And there's sometimes I'm like, wow, I didn't know that. And there's other times where it's like, I can't agree with you, but I can see your point of view. Yeah. And they've so taught me how to do that if I'm going to work there, you know, how I have to be that way in order to be a good teacher. And so I love being tested.
Yes. Yeah. And that's so much where that part of emotional intelligence is, that empathy.
Yes.
How can we put ourselves in another person's shoes? Because if we had some of the experiences that they have, then you could understand a lot better of why they do what they do.
Yeah. Or something similar, you know. So that conference I was at was actually looking at diversity and power and privilege and concepts in coaching. And, you know, they were saying that for people that are a different race than us, a different upbringing, we can't really stand in their shoes. But we can listen to, like, wow, thank you for sharing that, because I can see your picture. I can see your perspective. And I can understand. So understanding isn't necessarily having the same experience, because I will never have that experience. But I can come to learn from you and understand you. And if I can strive for that, how beautiful that is. So, yeah, it was a great conference, actually.
Yeah, it sounds very powerful. So the other thing I wanted to ask you is, when someone, because the brain's keeping ourselves safe, when someone gets into an amygdala hijack, is it that they have breaks out of that loop, or can people be in an amygdala hijack for a long period of time and not even realize it?
You know, that's interesting. I did a podcast just recently, a couple of weeks ago, that said, is there long-term mental health effects on continual amygdala hijacks? And there's a book, Stanford guy who runs the neuroscience department wrote a book, 20 years ago, called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. Named by Robert Sapolsky. He said, you know, zebras are mammals just like us, and they have the same stress response system.
Right.
But zebras are chased by lions like once, maybe twice a day, and they spend the rest of the day eating grass. He said, we're chased by lions all day long, and our system wasn't designed for that. And so he actually goes into all the breakdowns that we experience in our systems, our cardiac system, our immune system, our sexual system, our muscular system, our digestive, why it's hard to lose weight even, it relates to this constant hijacking that's going on. So I said, we have to start recognizing, what is it that's triggering me, so I can at least, go for a walk, and shift your sympathetic nervous system out of shock is what we do. And it's getting worse and worse, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
That constant reading of the news, and Facebook.
Yeah, like we have all these influences, the news, we have Facebook, social media, but also those stories that people keep replaying.
So we trigger ourselves. Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
So what would be 2 strategies that someone can do to get out of that loop?
Yeah. Well, we started this by when I said the first thing you have to do is be able to recognize I'm having an emotion. Mm-hmm. This isn't a mental process. This is a physical process. So, your fear, your anger, your frustration shows up in your body. So, do your shoulders tighten, your neck, your posture may shift, or I get tight in my stomach. You don't have to know exactly what the emotion is, but just to say I'm having a reaction. And the first thing to do is breathe. Right? Because we when we're afraid or we're angry, we hold our breath. Mm-hmm. And the quickest way to activate this parasympathetic nervous system that releases stress is to breathe and then do a quick body scan to release tension. You can't control your mind and say, oh, I want to feel patient, I want to feel calm, until your body feels that way. Mm-hmm. So we have to breathe and release the tension before we can go up, clear the mind, and choose how I want to feel in this moment. Mm-hmm. So those are the 2 things. You release the tension in your body and then make a conscious choice. Choose 1 or 2. I love you said curious before. Mm-hmm. So can I shift to feeling curious and care, or courageous and calm? And just hold those. And as you start to get triggered again, come back to curious and calm, or courageous and determined, whatever it is that you need in that moment. Those would be the 2 things I would suggest. And that comes out of Outsmart Your Brain. It's the process of shifting in the moment.
Yeah, I think we all need that to catch ourselves. I have an experience that when my daughter was 16 years old, that I had sent her to go buy a bathing suit because we were all going on this surprise trip to visit my sister, and she had gone to this store and came home and just threw the bag on the floor and carried on with what she was doing. And it wasn't until the next day that I grabbed a receipt, and I was like, she spent $200 on a bathing suit. And I was like, excuse me? And right away I'm like, okay, so how do I take responsibility for part of this? Was the first thing, because I didn't go with her. Mm-hmm. And I had told her to go by herself, and she went to a particular store, but I was like, no 16-year-old.
Set the boundary.
No. And then we went on this trip, didn't end up using the swimsuit, came back.
Oh no.
went swimming as a family, and the bathing suit she was practically falling out of. And it was not youthful. And then she's like, Mom, I can't wear this. I need a different bathing suit. And I'm like, how did you end up with this suit to begin with? So we got into the conversation. And I said, okay, we're going to go look for another suit because we were going on vacation in a few weeks. I went with her. She wanted to go to the same store. And she was trying on all these bathing suits. And it was getting close to closing time. And I could just feel myself heating up. I could feel the heat. I didn't feel like I was unpleasant or anything, but I finally looked at the sales girl who came by and just was checking on me to see if I was okay while she was trying on stuff. And I said, I don't know if you feel what I feel, but I feel triggered. And I just went into that language and I explained what had happened. And she's like, you should not have ever had that experience here. And the whole situation shifted because she took interest. She was curious
Yes.
and she wanted to know genuinely what she could do to help me.
That's great.
And we walked out, didn't get a suit there, went to Walmart, picked up a suit for $20 and went on vacation. And the girl had phoned me back and had said, can we offer you a discount? And I'm like, we already spent $200. A discount.
They wouldn't take it back. Yeah.
No. And then I said, that's okay. And she called me back like 5 minutes later, and the district manager approved her so that we could return the top. We couldn't return the bottom, but we could return the top portion. And they would give us a credit to buy something else in the store. And I said, well, as long as it's youthful, that it can make her feel good.
Yeah.
And sent her in. And it so happened, again, I couldn't go with my daughter. So I connected with the salesperson and I said, I'm sending her by herself and I truly apologize. And she got to know that my daughter played sports. She took my daughter came home from that experience. Instead of tossing the bag, she's like ran to change to show me what it looked like. She was strutting around. But I ended up sending a message to the owner of the whole store to say that, you know, you're not selling just a swimsuit.
Yes.
Although I was triggered, it turned out to be a beautiful experience because I didn't bottle that emotion up.
Yeah.
I was able to be with that emotion and share, because I thought, I'm sure they must feel this from me. I must be radiating.
Yeah. Well, but that's the point, Debra, that we do. Even when you said, well, I didn't show it, it doesn't matter. You know, we can now measure the electromagnetic energy of our emotions. So you're putting it out even if you think you have a poker face. So they could feel it, as well as you felt her calmness. You felt her interest, her curiosity. You know, that was beautiful that she did that. So you had an interaction at an emotional level, not just by words.
Yeah. And what the beautiful thing out of it was unexpected, that the owner of the company actually just forwarded my email to her entire staff.
Oh, wow.
To express, to show them that it's not just the suit. It's about the experience. It's about confidence and self-esteem, because how many people love going to try on swimsuits?
Yeah.
Not too many people that I know is their favorite thing.
No.
So one of the things I was also curious about when I was looking at the high achieving women finding contentment.
Yeah.
Because when it comes to high achieving women, you know, they're often juggling and carrying many hats. Do you find that as they grow successful, that others around them feel threatened?
Well, there's two things there. The whole thing around contentment is really relates to our restlessness. It's like that, okay, been there, done that, what's next? We're always looking at the next. We're always looking at the next. I have a quote that says, we don't climb the mountain to be at the top. We climb the mountain to see what other mountains there are to climb. You know, so we often do that. What happens is, because we have this push then to keep doing more and keep doing that, that achievement is an ongoing thing that we have to do, that other people don't quite understand. You know, the reason why I did my research was I felt like none of the women's leadership books related to me. You know, because I was looking at smart, strong women in the workplace. And we don't need books that tell us to speak up. We speak up sometimes too much. Yeah. We don't need books that say, oh, you have to learn how to say no because we're afraid. We don't say no because we think we're the only ones that can do it right. You know, so there are, you know, it drives me crazy how many books are written as if women were all the same. So yes, there are those women that have that constant restless need to keep doing more and making a difference. And there's those that don't. Instead of just saying, I'm different, and that's fascinating what you do, they're like, wow, is that forcing me to do that? And I don't want to do that. And and then there's animosity, and then we make up stories of those women. And we're not supporting each other. in the differences. And it's the same thing on the other side. Many times the high achieving women are like, well, why don't you speak up? Why don't you do more? Why don't you lean in? You know, when we just have to acknowledge that we're all on different journeys, and how can we support each other's choices, whatever that is.
Thank you for that, because it's very powerful. Because I know in talking to the women that I do, sometimes they'll be like, because I'm very much driven, high achieving. And, you know, in a survey or someone will say, Deb, I don't know if I can have my bar as high as yours.
Yeah.
At never at any time did I say, you got to have the same level of the bar.
Right.
We're two different people. We have different standards we set for
different bars. Yeah.
Different goals. We don't have the exact same path. We don't have the exact same journey.
Right.
And I think we have to give ourselves some grace to recognize that we are different.
And it will change too, right? With age. I mean, I can tell you in each decade, you know, my desires, what I wanted to achieve changed. And acknowledging that, you know, the book I wrote for that, I was her. You know, we change things up a lot. And people always ask, like, well, why are you doing that now? Well, because that's what I want right now.
Yeah.
So we have to allow each other's to change too, and not think we understand. We know each other too well. Well, you didn't like that last year. Well, this year I'm different. So we have to stay, that word you use, that curious. We have to stay curious about each other and what's changing for you now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that those dreams and goals and ambitions may change.
Absolutely, they change. You know, I was very corporate ambitious in my 30s, you know, and then I turned 40 and it's like, okay, I want to go do something else. And that's when I left and started my business. And, you know, I've had it now 20 years and more than that. And I focus on different things. I'm narrowing down, you know, what I want to do. And, which they always say you should pick a lane anyway, but but even in the books that I write, you know, I'm like, I've been all over the place. I'm narrowing into what is it that I want to achieve in the next 10 years, you know? So, yeah.
So I'm curious, when people feel like they have a calling, a purpose, and, you know, their brain says drive toward this.
Yeah.
Yet having that environment around them that says, why can't you just be happy? Like that high achieving women. It's kind of like, do you settle? But I don't think those women can, because of that restlessness. They must continue. Otherwise, part of them actually dies.
Right.
But I wanted to get your take on it.
Yeah. You know, it often comes up in my coaching. I hear it in the word should.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I should do this. People say, you know, I should be happy for the job I have. Take care of your family. How can you do that to them? You know, all those crazy things that, again, really comes out of their fear, not a truth. But coming back to, okay, so I hear everyone else's story. What is it you really want?
Mm-hmm.
And what is really the truth in what they're saying? Because it's like fear is foggy until we look at it. So is all those shoulds. Because I was coaching a woman who, her husband was an artist, so she had taken many positions moving up in leadership in this a global organization, and they even moved to Denmark. She was conscious that her two daughters, that she was, you know, moving them a lot and maybe not spending as much time as she would like. And she said the company offered for her to get an MBA. And she's like, I can't do that to my daughters. I can't do that on top of work and all of that. I'm like, do what? And how do you know that's true? And just that question, she's like, well, I don't know. I'm just assuming that. So she actually went and asked her daughters, and they're like, cool, Mom, that'd be great. We'd like to do your homework with you. And a couple of years later, she sent me the picture of her graduation with her daughters on either side. Wow. So proud of their mother.
Yeah.
So sometimes we make these, sometimes we hear the shoulds and sometimes we assume the shoulds. And either way, what are you stopping yourself from doing? What's the true harm? What's the real consequence? And what could be the gain out of that? You know, we need more women to step into their greatest possibilities because the younger women need to see that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Versus going into a place of settling and retreating.
Right. And, you know, people aren't, when I left my job, I left a lot of uninvested stock on the table, and I was called even stupid. You know, people were like, how could you do that? You left a lot of money. And it's like, but I didn't want to be there anymore. You know?
Yeah.
And I really had to, like, I don't care what you're saying. This is what I want to do. And we often have to do that, particularly as women. You know, whatever story you're telling yourself, that's your story, not mine.
Right.
So,
yeah, that's a good reminder. It's their story.
Right.
So how do we embrace discomfort of learning and growth, especially, you know, when we have these struggles and challenges that come up? How do we embrace it versus retreat from it?
Well, first off, learning happens always in a moment of discomfort, because we can gain knowledge and understanding, but we don't learn till we go out and do things. And when we try new things, it's always awkward. It doesn't feel great. When we recognize we're going to step out and do something, even though people are telling us we shouldn't, and we're not sure we're going to succeed, it's uncomfortable. You know, but recognizing that with discomfort comes growth. With discomfort comes possibilities. You know, with discomfort, we get to realize our potential. Without discomfort, we stay small. You know, so just saying, wow, it's like before with fear. I'm afraid. Wow, what's that about? We say, oh, I'm uncomfortable. What's that about? You know, what is it that is making me uncomfortable in this moment? I mean, even having a difficult conversation, it's like, well, it's not going to feel good, but I'm going to do it anyway. If we avoid discomfort, then we don't accomplish anything.
I think I'd be more afraid of being small.
Yes.
Not taking the chance.
And we should be, but we don't think about it.
Yeah. Well, it's almost time for us to go, but I did want you to touch on your most recent TED Talk. How anger is a good thing. Could you share with us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. You know, I say anger can be a force for good. And we're often, both men and women, taught that anger's bad. But it's not the anger. It's that if we don't look at what's making me angry in the moment, the anger often then shifts to something else: resentment, resignation, cynicism, and then it gets ugly. But if we stop and say, what's making me angry? What is it that I'm not getting that I think I should get, or I'm afraid I won't get? And can I then ask for it or stand up for it instead of releasing it? So I always say the reason that I've accomplished what I have in my life is that many times when people said I couldn't, I said, oh yeah, I'll show you.
That's your fuel.
Right, I'll show you, and then we go do it. So or in conversations, you know, so many times we might let people like, and often it's men, according to the research, will interrupt us. It's unconscious bias. But to stop and say, you know what, I would love for you to let me finish my idea, and then I'll listen to yours. Okay, to call attention to the interruption, to call the attention to.
I like that.
Right. I read an article this morning about we use the word girl too much. So, you know, to say, oh, the girls will handle that. No, don't do that. The women will handle that. To call attention, even though people might get embarrassed and defensive, but we need to call attention and state what we want instead. And oftentimes the courage is fueled by anger. So we need to use our anger not to punish people, but to create and ask for what we need.
Lovely. So, Marcia, how can people stay in touch with you?
Thank you. Well, you said it before. My website is outsmartyourbrain.com. So I'm Marcia at outsmartyourbrain.com. but there's a lot of resources, free resources on the website, tools under discomfort zone, tools they can use, and visualizations. So go on there, sign up for my blog, and reach out if there's a question that you have.
How wonderful. I'm grateful for the time that I've got to spend with you today. And I know we've talked a few months ago. I really encourage people to get outsmart your brain, learn how you can work with your brain and your emotions versus fighting up against them.
Yes.
Because Dr. Marcia Reynolds has a lot of exercises in that book to help support you.
Great. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And thank you for joining us on this podcast. You can go over to my website at www.debrakasowski.com and grab your 21 Habits High Achievers Kick to Achieve Success free ebook when you put in your email address. You can also go over to iTunes, give us a 5-star high five, write us a review of this podcast and how it has impacted you. The more reviews we get, the more people we get to tell about this podcast, the more we can change the world together. And living rich from the inside out using those principles of leadership, business, and human potential. As Muhammad Gandhi said, be the change you wish to see in the world. And from Marcia and myself, have a wonderful day.